Do you want to sort of start off by introducing yourself for students that may not know you and giving a little bit of a background on your industry experience and your involvement in Columbia?
Sure. So I'm Rachel Veiga. I am based out in New York, and my industry experience started shortly after graduating. Although I did not study advertising, I studied music, and then I eventually studied business because when I went to school, I didn't really know what I was going to do. But I love music, so I started there, and then realized I didn't want to use my music as like my profession. And I loved the idea of supporting other musicians, so business made sense. And then when I graduated, this is 2004, the whole music industry was being completely disrupted by digital. That's when Napster came into the world, and all of a sudden you can stream music online, which you couldn't do before. So I graduated and the music industry was crashing. So I couldn't find a job. And my dream job working at a label or music production, everybody was just closing the doors. We're not hiring, we're letting people go. And so I got a temp job, I got several temp jobs, and I got one at an digital advertising agency. And I took it, and it wasn't glamorous. It was pretty, just grunty work. It was not fun at all for me, for my creative left brain was just dying. And so they offered me a full-time job, and I said, no, I have to follow my dream. So I kept trying to do that, did not find a job. And then they hired me again as a temp. And I, at that point, really needed a job. And I called my mentor, one of my music business professors at school, to get his advice because I just was so lost. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to let go of my dream, but I also needed a job. And he explained to me that how advertising, entertainment were so intertwined, and how I needed to learn digital and online, which back then I didn't get to study because it wasn't really a thing. And so I did. I took the job and I cried because thought I was giving up on my dreams. And fast forward 15 years, 17 maybe now, a little bit over. And I've been in advertising. I've gotten to work with lots of musicians. I've done a lot of amazing events, worked with a lot of different brands and companies. And the worlds are very similar. And I'm very grateful for being in this industry and being able to help others. So that's a little synopsis.
Nice. And so specifically Columbia, you teach fashion advertising. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what that class entails and what students can expect from it? Because I know like course registration just started, so there may be students that are like looking at that course down the line and want to take it. And so do you want to talk about sort of what you've been doing with that course so far this semester?
Sure. Fashion advertising, we cover some basics. So we start with some, building blocks of fashion and advertising. But I would say it's 40% text, like textbook building blocks, because 60% new, what's happening currently. The thing with fashion and advertising, it's constantly changing. It's always like textbooks are outdated for the most part, but there's still some things that are common. So we cover basics, and then we spend a lot of time going through what's happening right now. So as an example, when we talked about fashion shows, we had like a viewing party, and everybody came to the class, and now it's a fully online class. So they came to the class with their favorite fashion show that they wanted to share, and we just watched fashion shows, and we talked about the fashion show and what's happening and the differences between what it was in the past versus now, or fashion collaborations. It's something that's been around forever. So it starts with like H&M and Karl Lagerfeld years ago to like now, where we can talk about Kanye West, Balenciaga, and Gap, and then launching their collection with NFTs. And you're not going to find that in the textbook. So that's what the class is. It's a mix of what's happening, what are those building blocks, and then what's current. And my hope with the class is that the students can leave, even if they don't want to go into advertising or fashion, but feel very confident with the language and understanding. So, because there's so much crossover within social media and PR and, all different types of marketing fields and design, that you need to know the language, and knowing the language then gives them hopefully confidence going into interviews or in their job already. So that's the class.
Yeah, and I love that, like, sort of, at least from the way you're teaching it, it sounds like it's sort of approachable to anyone who's, like, sort of interested in, like, that world, that and even if you're not, like, it's an opportunity to get involved and to, like, find.
That's right. There's some people in the class right now who don't really love fashion, and that's okay. And they don't really follow fashion brands. That's okay. But by studying it, they can apply it to a lot of different brands. My career, I've worked in tech, I've worked in auto, I've worked in finance, I've worked with airline brands, I've worked, a lot in fashion and beauty as well. But so much of it is transferable. So just understanding the basics and using fashion as a category to kind of anchor that is really, is helpful. So
You talked about, like, I guess one of the things that I found really interesting sort of doing my research is that you've worked with a variety of different brands. You've worked with Sephora, you've worked with Google, you've worked with Nike, and have like this sort of wide range of experience. And I think I look at that and I think about like being, applying for jobs currently, and a lot of other students may be applying for jobs and they see that and it's like, I feel like it's like, how do you get there, get to that point? And you mentioned sort of like you didn't even think you were going to go into advertising. So do you want to talk about sort of starting out from where you were to then ending up like at that point where you're working with some of those major brands?
well, my first brand was Western Union. I don't even know if you know what that is, but it's like online money transfer. And I was faxing, my job was faxing contracts. And that's like fax, right? It wasn't even emailing. And then got to emailing and we got, a little bit more digital. It was, that's where I started. That was my first brand that I worked with. But that brand taught me so much about just professionalism, writing good emails, how to deal with clients, what are contracts. So I'm grateful for a lot of just also these, brands where I start. And a lot of times when you start in companies, you don't get the glamorous one, or, a Nike, their expectation is different, for they want more of a senior team. So sometimes when you start out, you don't necessarily start out on the glamorous side, or maybe even a brand that you don't like that much or don't understand. I also worked on the automobile, like Volkswagen and Audi, and insurance. They were like Allianz. It's an insurance. I had no clue in my 20s what insurance was, in that sense. But, getting exposure to different industries really builds credibility. It builds, I guess, flexibility too in thinking, so that when you start working with some of the, I would say the big guns like Google and stuff that expect a really high level of understanding and knowledge, you can swim. I could swim. So and what's also interesting is, the relationship. So when I went into my job, the one thing that I did well is I did the best that I could. I gave it 100% no matter the client. And I took professionalism really seriously. So I moved up quickly and I got chances to go into another team because another team liked my work, and the client asked for me on their job because they liked, the effort and the heart I put into it. And to a point where, and why I jumped into fashion was when H&M was my client, and they actually poached me from the agency side into the brand side. And then I ended up getting to run advertising for H&M USA and launching new markets and doing a lot of big things with H&M. But it started with me just doing my job really well and making sure all my people I worked with, I was very professional and reliable. And then, you stand out, in that sense. So that's kind of how, it's evolved. And it's always been like that, I think, in every brand. And I work more recently back in the advertising agency world where I cover lots of different brands. And so, that I can go back to that and then have like a really good perspective, and range, like I spoke about before.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that also interests me, just like listening to our conversation, that like you didn't always have that interest in advertising, but then kind of found your way in. Do you want to talk about maybe like what that light bulb moment was for you of sort of like finding your way in advertising, then being like, this is what I want to do, and then being able to forge like such an extraordinary career as I feel like you have?
Yeah, I don't know I think it's the light bulb came a little bit out of necessity. Sometimes we just need a job. We need a starting point. And I taught, a lot of friends, whether in a lot of different stages of life, especially if they're changing careers or you just need to start. And that to me was my first light bulb moment. That was my, professor at the time gave to me, which again, I was not thinking. I was thinking my dream, my passion, and I just have to stick, that was the first light bulb being like, oh, I just need to start. I need a job. I can't keep temping and doing all these random things. Like I need to just commit and I need to grow. And so I would say a few years in, especially with the first company, I stayed with them for about 6 or 7 years, which is a long time in that like within advertising. You're after 3 years or 5 years, you feel like an OG. So but the benefit of sticking out, and I think now it's gotten shorter, just as a side note, I see a lot of people after 1 or 2 years wanting to jump. And what happens is that you can't build, so my light bulb came when I was there after probably like 3 to 5 years. And I started to realize how much I've been able to build and gain exposure to quickly within only a few years of my career, and the benefit of that investment from a company into me. So they put me into media university. I didn't have, that training from college. They subsidized more learning experiences for me. They sent me off to do and travel and to have exposure that I didn't, because I was there. I was a loyal, employee. And then, I got to a point where I knew that I had done, media and advertising. I wanted to shift to strategy and expand my own skill set. So there are those moments, but I would say the light bulb came like realizing the benefit of sticking it out and really just letting myself build the skill set, the relationships, and not jumping around too much. Same thing with H&M. I was there for, I think, over 7 years. And after year 3, you start to see the benefits of deep relationships. You have a certain vibe, you have a certain credibility and and just reputation. So things get easier. And then opportunities open, especially in big companies. They start to, trust and, support, you as a person. So I would say those were some light bulb moments that kept me within the industry. And then obviously those moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sponsoring Coachella. I'm here with all these artists, and the brand I'm working with is investing in this to happen. So all of a sudden my passion for music, for supporting the arts, is coming through my work. And those are other moments where I'm like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah. And I think like that has to sort of be maybe like talking about some of your proudest achievements or accomplishments, maybe getting to see, like, do you have like a specific moment that you feel like stands out to you in terms of like, this is something I'm really proud of that I did, or just like, I'm like, this is the thing that I feel like is going to be the standout of my career? Do you feel like that moment maybe hasn't happened yet for you?
That is such a good question, because I look back and there's so many moments that I'm like, oh, I've got a little bit of bragging rights on this, And yeah, it was like a lot of hard work, and I'm proud of it. So, things like doing the Super Bowl with David Beckham was the first time a fashion advertisement in the Super Bowl happened. And I don't know, like, yeah, we're inking the deal with Coachella and being the first fashion sponsor, and that lasting for 6 years. And, so things like that are fun. But what I would say I'm the most proud of, especially now in my career, and I'm realizing the value, I'm really proud of the deep relationships and connections and the partnerships that I've been able to form. And it was funny. I was listening to this podcast yesterday. It's called the Bit of Optimism, and Jean Olwang. She just wrote a book, and she's the CEO, founder of Virgin, basically the big non-for-profit arm of Virgin. She's worked with tons of different people. She has an incredible career, and she did this massive research into what makes a success. What is the secret power of these people that are highly successful? And so there's a lot of different things, but there was one common denominator of the most successful people in the world, and that was their ability to make deep, meaningful connections and the partnerships around them. And so it's a really great, if I would suggest listening. It's a really great talk about how important it is to surround yourself with people. And when I look back, and again, I have, in the little sliver of career that I've had, and like the connections that I've made that are deep, those are the things I'm actually more proud of, because I've kept in touch with people that meant a lot. It's opened doors for me. We open doors for each other. It just has made life more meaningful and more fun. And I think especially in the US, we over-index in this like sense of this rugged individualism that we kind of need to unlearn. And again, this is just a, factually based, where the thing that separates the good from the great are being connected to people, and know how to, foster these relationships and connections. So I would say, from the little that I've had experience with that, I'm so proud of that. And it has changed my lens on how I look at things, moving forward.
I feel like you've dropped so many nuggets of wisdom in this interview. Like I'm just feeling so motivated and inspired. And I haven't even like been in the classroom with you. This is the first time that we've ever talked, so I really, really appreciate that. But do you think maybe there's like one lesson or like one piece of advice that you would sort of want to pass on to students as they're sort of going through their careers, whether they be, interested in advertising or not, something that you feel like has really stood out to you as like, this is the thing that guides me in
Mm,
going forward in
mm,
my career that students may want or need to know as they're sort of
mhm.
going through college and starting that journey of finding their career path?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just go back to the forging deep and meaningful connections. That's one of my regrets, even looking back, being like, gosh, I really should have done more. When you start your career, it's so easy to get focused on the titles, how fast you're moving up, the places you want to go, the people But then you meet so many people, and sometimes nothing comes of it. And I do think there's so much ripple effects we're going to have to deal with post pandemic, where it's been easier to disconnect. We've actually had to, for survival, and so connecting again is even harder. So I understand the challenges with that, and I do think that it's something I have learned, that it's so worth holding those onto, and all throughout your career. So starting, midway, end way, where I'm kind of like in my you know kind of end way, midway. And it's something that, it really is so important, not just for, your career, but, in life. It really is what tethers people together. So that's a lesson I've learned through not doing it well, and then also trying to do it better.
And then obviously we're at Columbia, like, and I think this school like is super special in that it just offers like opportunities and experiences that I feel like you can't find anywhere else. So as an instructor at Columbia and someone who teaches here, what is it that makes you passionate about this school and about being here?
This is my first time teaching at Columbia, and I don't know much about it, and I haven't been on campus. But I know enough just from talking to faculty, being on some of the meetings where we're getting things ready and organized, and trainings to get class going. And what I do love and I sense is that the faculty and the whole, like everybody that I've met in admissions, they care so much about the students. They really have so much heart. And it's not about the compensation. It's not about, it is truly about a passion for developing and growing this new generation and passing on the baton, and anything we can do to make this nectar to you guys. You're like the future, make you go even further and do it even better than we've done. And I sense that, from everybody that I've interacted with. And so that's something that I really admire about the college.
And then I feel like we touched on so much. But is there anything that you feel like I missed that you would like me to cover? Any sort of final remarks that you have?
No, you've covered so much. Your questions are great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the only thing I would say is that I really believe in this generation. You have and forever, whoever's listening, you have so much going for you. And I know there's going to be a lot of challenges. So know that the generation past, whether it be your professors or other people in your circle, keep them close. Use us as your, sounding boards, as your, propellers forward. As just, if use the people around you as your support systems, because that is important. But you have you're just wonderful generation, beautiful, going to do a lot of wonderful things. So